Welcome. This is our second chat and we've had so much feedback that you loved the first one. So here we are again.
And I don't even have to put a big filter on myself, apparently. I'm pretty good.
A big filter?
Yeah, everyone was quite impressed with how I was quite open with how we discussed things last time.
Yeah, I meant a filter as in don't swear.
Oh, right, that filter. Right.
Although you can be, so to explain who we are, I'm a dressage rider and Greg is a horseman. So your background was with your dad. They had a bullock team and then they were doing fencing, stock horse. Greg started loads of horses. You ran a big breeding farm for 25 years or so. So Greg is an all-round horseman, and I met Greg, and I remember I said to him, "What do you think of this horse? He just seems really stressed." And he said to me, "He doesn't look stressed, but you do." And I was like, "Say what now?" But he was very good looking, so I said, "Tell me more, Greg." But he said, you look really braced. And I was like, wow, this guy, that's out of left field. Do you remember you teaching me that? So we worked out that I had, been in a half-halt position for so long with my horses that I'd actually stayed braced and that I was getting too stressed. So Greg's been very influential in my career as a rider. I've produced lots of beautiful Grand Prix horses. We often have to sell them, or give them back to their owners long before we're able to compete them, but that's part of the course. I've been a professional trainer since I was 15 years old and have paid our mortgage and bought all our beautiful horses, fixing lots and lots of problems and making horses' lives better. So we started this podcast because Greg, for you guys, but because Greg has had a new hip because he's also fixed many remedial horses and he's about to get another hip. And we knew that our time as professional horse trainers fixing everybody else's problems was over. And it was a big realisation, wasn't it?
It was. It was a big step back when I think the last time, the breaker's saddle's still hanging up in the tack room. I think I saw it there the other day.
Is it? I thought I'd gotten rid of it.
I don't know. We did say we're going to have a ceremonial burial of it.
Yeah, I don't think I can do it. It's been a massive, massive job for us to slowly wind the stables back. We've had every stable, every paddock, every wash bay full for all of our careers. So gradually winding it back for the last 5 years. It was about 5 years ago. My legs are bionic now too, and they're due for some updates. So we now have 12 horses on the property in work. Not even all of them are in work.
Not even in work.
And it is blissful. It's amazing. I've always said I had this dream just to have a really small stable with some really beautiful people here and just be able to write, do our podcast. And so we're finally doing it. And I'm glad that you could join us.
That is a big downside, isn't it? When you think about it, pre-EI, equine influenza, before it hit Australia, we had anywhere up to 140 horses on the farm. Usually about 80 of those in work.
And we didn't have a gator. We only had a wheelbarrow.
And I wasn't here full time back then.
You weren't here full time. I know everybody throws this word around, but I do have PTSD from those days. My life has been in 40-minute slots, and I have been in a hurry because the profit margin is very low in a stable, isn't it? So our labour is
what's the profit margin?
Oh, okay, so there is no profit margin. But you have to make every minute count and every minute pay. So, I still remember that I'd leave the family in bed and I'd be on the road by 4 o'clock in the morning at the very latest. And this is when we bought the place and we were still living where Greg was working. And I would be out here, I'd ride some horses on the way out. I'd arrive here. We only had temporary fencing, so I'd fix the fencing. I'd ride whatever horses we had here and race back, ride horses all the way home. It's been a really long haul, and finally being able to step out of that, it's wonderful. But there's also a tiny little part of me that goes, oh, so I'm not riding all day anymore.
No, gives us time to do this. Anyway, what's our controversial topic today? Did I see something on your notes about equality?
Yeah, can we have equality in dressage? Like there is in other sports, they're all separated up into males and females, and not at the Olympics there's not age brackets, but in most competitions there's the kids growing up through the soccer there's age brackets.
Would I be right in saying is equine sports, say at Olympic level, is that the only one that hasn't got male female separation? Because I mean swimming and running, all that stuff has got all male and female different teams.
I don't know, but it would be one of the very few that males and females are against each other. I know there's no time limit, because there was the Japanese guy that competed at 70, I think it was. But yeah, I think it is one of the only sports that male and female are very equal. Like I could compete against you. Some of my...
Would you win though?
I think I would.
Well, it's very true, isn't it? I mean, I watch a lot of different riders worldwide. Like we watch a lot of videos and stuff, and we watch a lot of our own students and stuff, and I guess to me, if you watch the male riders, we see a lot.
It must be hard for you to watch the male riders, because females dominate dressage well and truly.
And you know what? They probably should too, because I watch a lot of male riders, and I think a lot of theirs is sheer strength.
I started getting nervous when Greg started. This is Greg being controversial.
No, I said, well, I think it's sheer strength really that get a lot of the guys through some of these sports.
That's definitely it with some of the male riders. They're definitely, if you take their horses after them, a female would really struggle to ride that horse with finesse, because a man is stronger. I don't know if you took the strongest woman, in weightlifting and the strongest man in weightlifting. I know in running that men are still a little faster. And look, that could be an outdated... The last time I looked at it, it was 5 or 6 years ago, and men were still faster and stronger than women. But you don't need that kind of speed or strength to be a dressage rider.
Well, you don't in any of them. I remember, I'm going to go back a few years now, when I was pre-training thoroughbreds, and my foreman at the time, a fellow called Bobby McRae, was an ex-jockey, and Bobby was teaching me how to ride pre-trainers. And... that was back in the early 80s. It's a little while ago. And I remember him saying, because, I was brought up in the old school of starting young horses under saddle, or back then we used to call it breaking in, and it was pretty rough and wild, some of it. And Bobby taught me actually how to ride a thoroughbred at full speed, that you didn't need strength. It was all about tactics. And so
your horses are beautiful to ride. I've ridden Greg's horses all my life. I used to start them myself, and about 10 years ago you started even starting mine. And when you sit on Greg's horses, they're so light and so easy. So it's definitely not true across the board that men are stronger riders. But what I mean is, it is one of the only sports where a woman can be completely equal to a man. Like I can compete against a 6 foot, 20-year-old man in dressage and have as much chance of getting a good score as he does. Whereas if I had to do a running race with him, well, I'd have to throw rocks at him to win.
Isn't that interesting?
To sabotage.
It's interesting how that's never been taken into consideration. I mean, controversy right here at this moment with gender and all that sort of stuff, and it's the crossover of things. Transgender has just been banned from women's netball.
Whoa.
And you go, well, that's pretty fair, but then I've seen some pretty big women I wouldn't want to come against on a netball field.
I can't get into that, because I can see both sides, and we're talking about, should transgenders be allowed to go into female bathrooms? And as a mother, Andy went into a bathroom at the Opera, and a 6'5" guy came in a dress. And he was really scary looking. I think he had probably been doing some things he shouldn't be doing. And as a mother, I did not want him in the bathroom with my child. But I have absolutely love and compassion. Many of my friends are transgender. But
that's probably a whole new topic.
It is.
So we're talking, I mean, even
you're quite right that I believe that it shouldn't need to be
men's and women's dressage tests.
Because you're right, but you're interrupting me, so I couldn't tell you that it isn't about strength, and that you used to say that you'd prefer to always employ female grooms because you thought they were more gentle with the horses, but that shouldn't be necessary. A male should be able to be as light and as kind a rider and handler as a female.
Yeah,
and many times is.
And I ran a big farm with show horses for 25, 30 years, and even in the barn here, and
Look at me, I'm starting to get anxious
Well,
thinking about what
it's
Greg's going to
interesting
say.
because females do become, girls and women are better grooms for horses than what men are. And over the years, the few men that I've had...
That's a were.
Look, there's a couple of really great male grooms that I know of and are fantastic. Like, I would take them in a heartbeat. But on the whole, most men try to dominate too much.
Yeah.
And that's what I see in riders.
Well, I know as far as you go that men are not as in touch with their emotions.
I'm fully in touch with my emotions.
Are you?
I'm
He's
very
not.
strongly in touch with my emotions.
So you've got your male, female, and your strength. As far as equality in sports, what about age? Do you think that you should be banned at a certain age from competing at a top level or competing at all?
Well, I mean, if you probably come in on your oxygen tank, you probably shouldn't be there.
I don't know.
But how old was a Japanese guy again? Was he 70
He's in his 70s. You know, and then look at the top riders now. Then certainly not in their 70s, but Isabel Worth, Carl Hester, Rainer Klimke wasn't a spring chicken when he won his last gold medal. So, I mean, people are saying that if you don't, you're not quick enough, you don't have control of your body as quickly. I know that I'm certainly not as quick to be able to bend over and pick something up and run up the road, but my responses on a horse are just as quick as they've ever been.
Well, and you know, interesting enough for that, you know, over the years of educating riders and stuff, and you become very wise in your old age, and it's not about speed. You know, I was doing one this morning where, you know, the rider was starting a young horse, and I said, you've got to slow things down a little bit. And I guess that comes with age and maturity. It's about, to me, then watching a mature rider ride a horse or school a horse that's having problems with it. The mature rider knows how to get around that problem a lot of times.
Yeah,
and whereas the younger trainer's a bit like, well, wow, I've never been presented with this problem. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Whereas the older trainer goes, well...
Got their toolbox.
Yeah, we've got a toolbox, and their toolbox is a lot bigger.
I know for sure, Andy and I often say that after we ride, we feel more alive and our bodies feel healthier. I know that it keeps me strong riding all the time.
Oh, and I think rider fitness. I've never seen a person so fit, probably as a rider itself. I mean, even though we used to see them, you know, coughing and spluttering and smoking and drinking Coke and beer, but to me, being riding fit is the ultimate fitness level you can possibly get. And I know I haven't ridden much at all in the last probably 15 years. Mainly because the horse I've had here haven't been probably that easily rideable.
So he throws his wife on them.
I throw my wife on them. But I'm also aware that my movements aren't as quick because I'm not fit with them. That's not to do... I'm sure I could probably sit on most of them and get a really good feel out of them. But it's certainly... I don't think age should be anything to do with... You know, because there's benefits of both. There's benefits of what we call a warm body to chuck on a young horse, which is our young horse riders. But there's a benefit also if I had a wise old cowboy to chuck on some of those young horses, he'd probably sit there quietly and just go with the horse and just flow.
Well, but when you get older and you're talking about young horses, we have different calculated risks. You know, I have a bigger mortgage than a young person. You know, and my body has been smashed up and now it's made of very expensive bits. So I make calculated risks now when I'm riding what horses I ride. And if I'm not fit, if I've had an injury, I definitely prefer getting on my quieter ones. I don't know that I necessarily got any quiet ones, but I definitely would prefer to get on a quieter one than something that's going to bounce me around, because if you've been injured, your body doesn't move as quickly as you tell it to, especially if you're used to being fit. You know, if you're used to a body that fires when you tell it to and then you've got a broken hand, you're just not going to have the same responses that you expect.
Yeah.
But I think if you're older and you're still riding, then you've got an incredible love for horses and for your sport, and that's
Oh, definitely.
You know, I think that's such a boon to our industry.
And I think, you know, certainly the older you are, you become more romantically involved probably with the whole thing of, you know, these kids that go, romantic, you know, the first thing I want is a Palomino pony and da-da-da-da. But I feel, you know, if you're still in it at our age and doing it, it's because you do really love it and you're passionate about the sport.
And you've often got a little bit more cash to spend, which is brilliant for the industry too.
Yeah,
Keeps
or a lot less cash to spend if your wife's got a couple of good dressage horses. So that's interesting. Equality, as in financial. You know, if you know, I guess we don't. I guess the industry is a little bit small at the moment, so we know a bit more about who's who in the industry, and we see a bit more of where there's some younger riders come through that are doing really well overseas, and of course they're backed up with some pretty good financial support.
Yeah.
Is it being wealthy as being equal. So should we have rich person's tests compared to poor person's tests? But I then feel that sometimes that rich person might have raced ahead towards those levels.
Well, you could throw them all into a derby for the championship, but then often, the trainers are then getting on untrained horses.
So I was about to say, half those horses I wouldn't let you get on.
And the riders, are then getting on the trainers' more trained horses. So I don't see that that's a fair way of doing it. I did think that they could have a cap, and if you've paid more than $200,000 for your horse, that you're in a different class. Because once you're paying that kind of money for a horse, you can afford your osteo, your chiro, your indoor, your When you start paying big money for horses, you have more money than your average Joe.
So there's going to be assets tested, you reckon?
Oh, it'll never come in. But imagine, I'm not talking about for the Olympics here, but in your normal classes now, they're separated into juniors, child, pony, amateurs, and it is hard for your average rider, especially in Australia where everyone can really own a horse. Land is cheaper here, horses are cheaper, not all of them, but in Europe, it's much more expensive to own a horse. There's less land, so renting a stable is more expensive than here.
And my thought upon that a little bit is, we've got to be careful, because the more we start splitting up that group of people that could have been in that one test, which could have been 50 people in that one test, we're now sort of diluting it down a little bit, aren't we? With children's, juniors, amateur owners.
And what would you call the other class?
But in America,
the lucky people, the lucky ones.
Well, in America, for example, that when they break up a lot of their classes over there, they've got age groups in their classes over there a lot. With I'm not sure so much about the dressage scene over there, but I know in the big Arabian scene, for example, you have amateur owner classes of age groups as well, so they're tiered that way.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they do an assets test one like Cheryl wants to do, but we'll see. We can
I don't
run
know
the
that I
assets
want
test
to
past
do
you.
it, but I was thinking about it when I sort of looked down a lineup.
Show us your bank balance and we'll let you know which test you're going to be doing.
Yeah, well, it's impossible. But when you change registration on a horse, when you buy a car, you have to do it. When you register your car, you have to put down how much you paid for it. You can lie, so there's no way of policing it.
No.
But for me, the Olympics would become a better sport if every single horse in it had to be trained by the same rider from, say, elementary all the way through. And then I don't think many of the gold medals so far would change. Charlotte trained Vallegro the whole way through. Isabel trained Gigolo, Anki trained Bonfire. Like, some of the greatest horses in history have been trained by the same rider from go to woe. Yeah. And none of those riders that I just named are from money. Charlotte certainly wasn't. Anki wasn't. Isabel wasn't. Her father was a farmer. And Anki...
If you look even at some of the Australian horses, straight up, you've got Heath and Rozzy with Regard Noir and Jive Magic, both brought into the country as youngish horses, both ridden and trained by those two riders right through to their Grand Prix levels.
And I don't know, do you think if that was the case, obviously horses being sold for big bucks can still compete at Grand Prix and at CDIs and all that kind of stuff, but would owners then go to a trainer knowing that trainer had a horse that was possible to go to the Olympics, and instead of buying it for the other rider, say, I want naming rights to your horse, or would it put more money back to the person that had trained the horse from the get-go? Would that equalise it a little bit?
Well, it's a bit of a thing, isn't it, where you hear these people. I know, that really good English groom we had come over here one year, and she travelled to Australia. The only reason she left England from her own yard, she ran her own yard in England, came to Australia, is because she sold her good horse that was getting ready for which games? She sold it to the Italian team for one of the games. And we're like, wow, you sold your horse. Well, they offered me good money, so I sold it. So,
she said, I would never have been able to afford to take it.
Yeah.
There's no way. She did very well, I think, at badminton and somewhere else fancy, and she'd taken the horse as far as she could financially, and it made she could move to Australia, and she was able to buy a house, and so that's what she wanted to do. So I guess on that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But when you're talking about removing a sport from the Olympics, does it need a closer look so that people feel like it's achievable? But I guess they already do. If you're seeing top riders that are doing it and they've made money and they're surviving, I guess it
It's a big open thing, isn't it, equality in that sort of stuff? Because you go, well, where does it become equal with financial gain and things like that?
I guess the other thing that you really need to think about as far as equality goes, well, there's three other things, but let's start with, what about your temperament?
Oh, yeah.
There are several different styles of temperament for horse riders, as we all know as human beings. So I look at Greg has an ideal temperament as a horse rider. He's naturally patient. He's naturally happy-go-lucky. He's naturally very even, whereas I am not. I am naturally very intense. I'm hypersensitive. And I watch the young riders coming through, and ideally, the riders like Greg are the ones that you give a tool set to, and they find it a little easier. That being said, they often don't have the same drive. You have the same grit, but you don't have the same drive. So that ability to be, a high-performance athlete, you often need that super intensity and super grit. So what if you're a person who's very fragile and doesn't have much grit? How are they equal to somebody like me that's like a power steamer all the time, and somebody like you that's very equanimous all the time?
They're not equal, are they? And certainly you're not at that top spectrum of, because we see a lot of people above your sort of.
I'm definitely on the spectrum, but I don't know what spectrum do you mean?
Spectrum, sorry, a bad word probably. But there's a lot more people, a lot more intensive than you, that should never be riding on a horse because they're too emotional about it. They're too energized about it.
Is that a personality type, or that they again don't have the right toolbox to be able to manage their emotions on a horse?
Well, and it's usually they've gotten to that stage in their life and their maturity where they're not going to be able to be really repaired. But then it's up to them then to understand, and accept that, well, I'm not going to get to that level of competition. I'll just be happy down here in these levels of competition.
But they're just as bad at any level. I remember we had this gorgeous girl, and off a horse, she was just friendly and funny and bubbly. And on a horse, she was a raving lunatic. And I said to her, Mum, we really need to work on her basic mental skills.
She needed to ride a wooden one.
And her mum said, I hope she quits. And I was really surprised because her mum was horsey too. And she said, I hate seeing her like this. I hate how she treats me when she's like this. I hate how she treats herself, how she treats the horse. She did actually pack it in a few years later. But I thought it was such a shame that she was unable to stop, identify what was happening, identify her why. I think that everybody that loves horses should ride them, but I think if you're inclined to be extremely intense and emotional, that you really need to do that in order, because horses pick it up straight away.
Well, and she was aiming at a little bit, probably a level above where she needed to be, and she's probably choosing a sport that wasn't going to be for her. She would have been better off going out and doing some great work at working equitation, something like that. So her choice of sport was probably not the greatest one, and her choice of horse was probably not the greatest one.
The need for perfection. Yeah, the horses were too high-blooded for her. Yeah, that's true. But as a mother, I've watched Andy, who has a very similar... Well, she's a good mix of Greg and I, but she's more similar to Greg than she is to me. She has a really good equanimity in all of her life, but she definitely has a huge drive to be successful. And success to Andy means a lot different to other people's success. Success for Andy is that her horses are happy, that she has a good time, and that she nails the elements she's been working hard enough on. But many times in Andy's life, we've stopped and we've helped her to regulate her emotions on a horse, because there's a lot happening up there. It's not just the success. It's also your safety. It's also, the comparison of other riders around you. And Andy's always been surrounded by other top riders. So that's been, for me, really important as a mother, that Andy 100% understands that the horses can pick up what you're feeling, and that you need to get on your horses feeling as centered and calm as you possibly can.
So that sort of side of equality, I suppose, is something that can be learned, though, isn't it? It's not something you can change that. You can change that equality of what you've got in your personality. You can change that by training. What about, though, talk about equality, what about if you're 4 foot tall compared to going out riding against someone that's 6'6"?
Are you looking at me when you say
well, you're
4
not
foot tall?
4 foot tall, are you? So that's a bit of a tough one, isn't it? And look, I remember the conversation Brett was there one day at a comp somewhere, and you were yakking away, and you said something to Brett, I'd love to have those big long legs of yours, Brett, to be able to get around those horses. And Brett turned around and said, you know what, Shell, I often think I'd love to be the height of you because I actually don't have to have these big long legs on these horses. So that was interesting that you both had an idea that it wasn't great. You know, you would have changed probably little things about both of yourselves.
That is a really good point. I remember my coach saying, I'm sitting here watching this and I'm thinking, why are the judges not giving you 9s? It was a half pass or something I was doing it. And he said, and then I think it's because of the shape of you. And I was like,
the shape of you.
Yeah, he said, we need to put stretchy things on your legs, like put you on the rack and make your legs longer, and then the picture will be nicer. And I thought, bloody hell. And it's always a thing too. Like for a long time, a lot of the top riders were tall and very, very beautiful. And Charlotte smashed that out of the way, and Isabel, you know, because Charlotte has a lovely body, but she's not super tall. And Isabel's very muscular, and she's certainly not skinny.
Some of those girls in Europe at the moment are just, I honestly don't know how they can get through a dressage test.
Oh, they're gorgeous.
Nothing of them.
Yeah.
There's nothing of them.
Yeah, but that's just not the body type that you aspire to. And you're a father. You're never going to aspire to skinny girls when you're trying to raise your daughter to be healthy and well. But I think that there is definitely a concept with a lot of people that they think that you have to be tall and thin to do well. It's not true. I think being short, I'm able to look quite nice on ponies, dressage ponies, all the way through to really big horses. I do really struggle with horses like my mare with really well-sprung ribs because my foot is sitting on the widest part of them, which is quite uncomfortable. But I don't think having longer legs or shorter legs really changes us so much as riders. I think I'm more versatile.
You know, it's interesting when you look at a lot of the cowboys doing reining and cutting and stuff. And those little quarter horses, they're quite small, some of those little horses. They're only sort of 14.2, 14.3 hand horses. And you've got these 6'6", 6'7" cowboys. Big long legs on these horses.
6'7" on quarter horses.
Yeah,
quarter horses are about 14-1, aren't they usually?
Oh, 14.2, 14.3 up to 15 hands. Some of your bigger American horses
I'd like a quarter horse, speaking of that.
Yeah, well, I had one, but you got rid of it on me. But it's you know, that's the thing. You go, well, wow, you know, what do you guys? One of my favourite riding horses of all times was only 14.2, and I'm 6'2".
Yeah, my grey mare, my first Grand Prix horse.
Yeah.
She was 14-1.
So it's interesting when you talk about both things. Some people say, if you got long legs, it's good because you're going to be able to get your legs down and around them and do it. But I mean, that's probably fine on a horse that's going to turn itself inside out. You can get your legs down and around it, but do you want to have long legs that doesn't actually touch the rib cage when you're asking it to do something?
I'm sure
like
there's difficult parts of that. I personally wouldn't know with these babies. But what about if you're, as far when you're talking about equality, a lot of the top riders have been badly injured. They're certainly don't belong in with the paras because paras are just so inspiring. But, you know, putting somebody in, you know, with a bionic leg and, you know, all my vertebrae, well, not all of them, but the bottom ones are smashed down on top of each other and, you know, a bit of brain damage and whatever. Putting that in against somebody with no legs, I mean, I just don't belong. I mean, there's grades for it as well.
And I guess that's why they've been so strict on the grading of it, isn't it? Because there is that. I mean, I could go out and I could probably become a para pretty easy with I've got an artificial hip now, so I could probably be a...
Oh, you could. You'd be shopping in my
level
stable.
5 or something.
No, you're out, Greg. But compare me as an athlete to Andy with her beautiful young unsmashed body. You know, Andy can go in the young riders and the juniors and that sort of stuff. But am I at the Olympics at a distinct disadvantage to the younger people that aren't all smashed up?
That's, I hate to say, that is self-choice as to why you like that, because you chose a career as a young person.
But, like in the Olympic Village, do they have better mattresses for me compared to Andy? Like Andy could sleep on a cot, but I need my I need my really good mattress.
Weren't they saying at the last Olympics the beds were basically fold-out, collapsible cardboard
Yes, yeah, and
frames?
I could never do that. I mean, not that I'm going to the Olympics anyway, but if you put me in a bed like that, I'd be crippled the next day.
So
couldn't do it.
You've aspired your whole life to get to that peak of competition to the Olympics, right?
And you couldn't walk.
And like our mattress cost us, I don't know what it was, but it's pretty
expensive. We paid it off for quite a while.
And so we've got this amazing mattress that you sleep on because it's the most comfortable thing for your back ever. And then you get selected for the Olympics, right? So off you toddle to the Olympics. And say we've gone to Paris, and we've gone to Paris to the Olympics. You turn up at the Athletes' Village, which apparently it's pretty bad. And then
that
you
too.
get into this little room, which a lot of times there's just portable buildings, and you're shoved into, the ones I saw, they were fold-out cardboard beds.
I just couldn't do it. And
they
I
say
did think of
you're
it.
there for 2 weeks or something.
We're supposed to go to Paris and help and groom and whatever. And I heard that and I thought, okay, wait a minute.
There's no
So wait a
stars
minute,
in
there's
front of that.
not proper transport, so I'd be lame. Like you'd have to put me in roller skates and just push me around. We've done that before.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to walk because my back would be hurting. And then on top of it, with the Crohn's, I wouldn't be able to eat the bloody food.
But hey,
So I'm out.
you made it to the Olympics.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Are people who aren't paras, but who, have funny tummies, can't walk long distances. Okay, so me. But there's so many like me. It's not just me. In my personal peer group, not many of us would be able to sleep on a bed like that. No. So if we had a choice as a country to send me or Andy, yeah, I'm really experienced. And I have a nice horse and blah, 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 blah.
Everyone's going to feel better when they get up the next morning ready for their test.
You'd be better to send Andy. Because you wouldn't be able to get me on a horse.
You wouldn't be able to get her out of the bed.
Oh, well, guys, thank you very much for joining us. And I hope that the subjects that we're bringing up are fun for you to listen to. And let us know if there's anything you want us to discuss. So our next one is probably going to be a bit emotional for some people because I know it touches on a raw nerve.
Oh, what are you going to talk about?
We're going to talk about why compete at all. Because I know a lot of people have given up because they don't want a million trolls jumping on saying, how can you wear a double bridle? And, I was watching something, it came up when I went to load a tutorial on TikTok. And it was, Spanish white horse. And the guy was going around and he was on the curb with the snaffle and a big loop. You know how they do and they ride with the whip up this way. And it's traditional, it was fine.
So double bridle.
Yeah.
Snaffle and a loop.
Yeah, and on the curb.
But the curb rein tight. Okay, yeah.
Yep. And when you say tight, it wasn't negative tight, but it was the rein he was using. And I looked at it and I thought, well, I wonder what everyone's going to say about that. And then I had a quick look and there were...
Do you think that guy's given up now?
It's probably committed... No, I'm not even going to say it. I'm not going to say it. I'm not as controversial as you. But the majority of the comments were, this was what dressage should be. This is what it should be. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay. And then some people are like, is nobody seeing?
Don't get into the topic too much because it's going to be an interesting one, this one. I'm going to start making notes about it because there's some good stuff in there.
But it's that kind of stuff. Jessica Von Bretto is saying, I can't put much up about my training anymore because you'll troll me so much. And I was happy to share. She's been really very generous with some of the things that she shared. And I know that a lot of people are editing their reels, to the extent that young people looking at it think, oh, well, that's how perfect dressage should be. And so we're going to get into why compete at all and the perfection culture that's been coming up because I found it incredibly interesting how many people had piled on from the complete opposite point of view. Everyone's saying you shouldn't touch your curb, and then all the same people were saying that this guy was the most beautiful rider in the world and he wasn't even using his snaffle. And I thought he did a nice job.
You're on two topics there. We nearly break that up off into another one about how badly social media affects people as riders as well.
Well, it's frightening a lot of people off competing. And I guess one of the biggest things of competing is nobody likes being judged, and then we go to a show and we pay people to judge us.
Well, we were warned years ago. I remember being in the show ring and we had handlers meetings before we went into the ring, and we were warned then that there were people in the crowd videoing and to not do stupid stuff. And we said, well, look, my argument always was against that was, well, if you want the handlers to stop doing stupid stuff in the ring, stop them doing stupid stuff at home.
Absolutely.
And in the warm-up arena.
But you can't take the human out of the human.
No, of course you can't.
Anyway, that's for next time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Catch you soon.